especially when talking about the overlaps between politics and racism. I always find it useful to offer people a parallel example from another corner of the world where they personally don't have any attachment to the religion or ethnic identity involved. What if this same scenario we're discussing on the border between Gaza and Israel were instead unfolding in Myanmar? What if instead this concerned the Karen in their fratricidal inter-ethnic struggle against the Burmese? You may have never heard of the ethnic group of the Karen before. I don't blame you. Guess what? The Karen hold the record in the Guinness Book for the longest running continuous war in the history of the modern world. The Karen were fighting for their independence against the state of Myanmar since the old days when it was called Burma. You may have no sympathy for either side, and that detachment may help you to recognize what the matter of principle involved here really is. If you are a pro-Karen, anti-Burmese person, and you say, hey, the Karen are this oppressed minority, they have this terrible history, does that mean you would approve of people doing what Hamas is doing in this footage from the Gaza Strip? Does that mean that border guards would be wrong? That it would be morally wrong for a border guard to shoot someone who was cutting a hole in the fence that marks the border? Someone working their way through barbed wire and a fence. It's their job to guard the border. Now, even if you took up the most extreme position where you just say, hey, from your perspective, the modern state of Myanmar doesn't have a moral right to exist, and the Karen are an oppressed minority, and therefore this border shouldn't even be there. The border should be somewhere else in your mind. How did you get from that set of values to the justification of what the Palestinians are doing in Gaza as a quote-unquote peaceful protest? It's self-evident. What Hamas is doing is not a peaceful protest, neither in its intentions, nor in its methods, nor in its outcomes. Is this something I could possibly approve of? Neither in Israel, nor in Myanmar, nor in South Africa, nor, hey, let's get closer to home here. I grew up in Canada. I have all the sympathy in the world for the indigenous people of Canada. In fact, I proved it by signing up to learn Algonquian languages. Very difficult languages to learn. Signed up to learn Korean Ojibwe at First Nations University. I have 1 million YouTube videos on my channel talking about this. Guess what? If the Korean Ojibwe start doing what the Palestinians are doing, if they start doing what we've all just seen, the peaceful protests, the demonstrations, I wouldn't support them either. Okay? And it might be very sad. It might be heartbreaking. You might look at it and say, gee, you know, these people, they have this long, terrible history. This is the problem with appealing to context and history. Don't you realize that what you're doing is making an excuse? It doesn't matter how compelling your excuse is. It remains an excuse. And just look at the reality of what it is you're making an excuse for. And this was the excuse that various left-wing people sent to me by email, YouTube comment, various ways they have to get in touch with me. This is the excuse they sent in to me when I asked them to use sympathy as an analytical tool and to sympathize in this scenario with the young men who are pulling the triggers, the young men who are actually guarding that border. That when people come up to cut a hole in the fence, it really is their job to shoot them. And I used various examples. I said, hey, what if there was a protest, a peaceful protest in front of a prison? Wouldn't you expect the prison guards to prevent people from breaking through that fence? And this type of overly emotive language masks what the matters of principle involved here really are. I think when there really is a clear matter of principle, that's exactly what makes this question of historical context irrelevant, or a lot less relevant than it might be. If in principle you're against these methods, fire bombs, lighting the tires on fire, cutting through the fence, if in principle you're against that, then the historical context surrounding it is not going to be a compelling excuse for it. Let's just say I'm really morally opposed to Amazon.com. Let's just say I was one of these people. I was really enthusiastic when Bernie Sanders claimed that Amazon.com didn't pay their employees enough, and I was really mad about Amazon.com's powers of a monopoly and some of the things they've done to drive other companies out of business. I feel they're unfair, non-competitive, non-free market practices. Let's say I'm a really strong proponent of the idea that the American government should intervene and break up Amazon.com into several companies, or that they should be fined by the Securities and Exchange Commission, and Amazon.com should cease to exist. Let's say I have the most extreme position that Amazon.com has no right to exist. And then you tell me that, your brother is a jewel thief. Your brother is a professional cat burglar. And your brother broke into Amazon.com. He went there and he cut a hole in the fence and he climbed through a window and he went into Amazon.com's head offices trying to steal something of value. And the security guards shot him dead. Who would I sympathize with? Who would I support in this situation? What? That's ridiculous. Why would you expect me to support the burglar if I'm against burglary in principle? It doesn't mean I'm only against burglary when I like the people being burgled. It doesn't mean I'm only against violence and fire bombs and these other tactics when I like the people who are the victims of that violence. This makes no sense. No, I'd say, hey, look, I don't support Amazon.com. I think Bernie Sanders is right, or I think, the federal government, the anti-monopoly, they should break up a monopoly. This company, it's a bad company. But are you kidding me? What? The security guards weren't wrong to shoot that guy. He was a cat burglar. He broke in. He cut his way through the fence. That's their job. If you break in, they got to stop you, arrest you. And sometimes somebody's going to get shot. And guys, for many of you, coming from many different camps in modern political science, these might be unfamiliar questions, but to me, they're really very familiar. Because in the last 5 years, I've been involved with veganism and animal rights, and maybe the number one question that gets asked and answered again and again and again is, hey, if you think that this animal testing laboratory has no right to exist, that vivisection is morally wrong, they torture monkeys to invent a slightly redder shade of lipstick, new tube of toothpaste, they're torturing these animals in this laboratory. Laboratory is immoral, therefore it's perfectly fine to be a burglar or a vandalist, to break in and steal something, or break in and burn something. No, you're dead wrong. I'm 100% against you in prisoner. If you're the burglar, if you're the one cutting a hole in the fence, even though I may be 100% against this particular laboratory that's testing on animals. If you say this slaughterhouse has no right to exist, where they commit these atrocities every day against thousands and thousands of animals. If you say this zoo has no right to exist, Marineland, this water park with captive dolphins and whales, don't you realize what it is you're doing here? Don't you realize that you're making an excuse? I mean, ultimately, no matter how evil the zoo might be, no matter how evil the laboratory might be, you still are putting yourself in the position of the aggressor, of the criminal, of the person who is resorting to violence. And there is an alternative. If you want to express your moral disapproval of Amazon.com, if you want to express your moral disapproval of the meat industry and what's going on in a laboratory on campus, you've got democracy. You've got peaceful protest, which is actually a peaceful protest. You have all these wonderful means at your disposal, including what we're doing right here, right now on YouTube. Don't tell me that the historical context justifies your immoral actions. Stop and reflect on what it is you do when you make an excuse, and what it is fundamentally you're making excuses for.
I mean, really, people like to disrespect my crew, but the fact is that you know my name and I don't know you.